Hello and welcome once again to episode 115 of Code Completion. We're a group of iOS developers and educators hoping to share what we love most about development, Apple technology, and completing your code. My name is Dimitri and I'll be your host once again for this episode, and I'm joined today by my fellow completionist, Spencer.
Hey there.
So, starting off, we have a small correction to share in a segment that I'm calling Deprecation Warning to keep with the theme of our badly named segments. And this has to do with the LPDDR5 that the most recent Macs and now iPhones have. And that is with regard to ECC, or error correction. We previously were wondering whether DDR5 had actual error correction, so there's no longer a need for actual ECC RAM. You can just use DDR5 RAM and that has it built in. And this is useful for things like servers that are going through memory quite a bit, and you'll start noticing if there are some bit flips more often than you would on regular consumer grade machines or regular use. And the reason why we brought this up is because we both heard that perhaps DDR5 includes ECC, and therefore it does not need to be, the specification includes ECC, and therefore it does not need to be fully implemented by the chips themselves. You might be wondering what the LP in LPDDR5 stands for, and that's low power. And that's just Apple's insistence that their machines use as little power as possible. And if you don't need to give the memory chips as much power as you would otherwise, then you can save power overall, because that's the thing that always needs to stay alive no matter what. Otherwise, the computer is essentially off, even if the CPU is not really doing anything. Though that said, the M1s are basically always running. They're so efficient that they never turn off even during sleep. And that is just the new world we live in. So for DDR5, there are a few different variants of ECC that can be implemented. And specifically for LPDDR5, there's only one that's super mandated. And we linked to an article that goes over all of these. But the one that LPDDR5 kind of makes the most use of is link ECC. And this basically means that the communication channel between the CPU, the memory controller, and finally the actual memory that's on the chip, that is error corrected. So you're not going to get any problems from that communication. And that's error corrected because the density is so high and the channels are so wide that you're likely to get some crosstalk between the actual channels. Right. They're not even thinking about cosmic rays bombarding your CPUs or your memory, and therefore causing bit flips. They're just thinking about, hey, what can we do to make sure that the communication between the chip and the CPU is as robust as possible, and they have a single bit of error correction per request. So that's where the ECC part of LPDDR5 really comes in. There are a few other areas where it can be saved. It can be saved on die or in line with the lanes, the access lanes, but that is not something that is always implemented. I have learned. So when you see LPDDR5, it's not the same thing as ECC RAM, even though we might have been led to believe that because we said it on a podcast. Yes, it's way more complicated than that. I just wanted to put this public announcement out there that we were spreading nonsense, and just understand that it's more complicated. And if you really, really care, you better really, really understand what on earth is going on. And I hardly do. So I'm just going to leave it at that.
Does that article mention anything about just normal DDR5 actually using ECC, or is it just the LPDDR5 that kind of doesn't?
Didn't I just mention that I hardly understand? No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
So DDR5 DDR5 does have the opportunities to actually encode this, but it's only really part of a standard rather than part of an implementation necessity. Like if you only have 2 gigabytes of RAM, there's no real need to have error correction because the rate at which you'll have an error is relatively low. But once you start having 100 gigabytes of RAM, then that rate is the same, and you just multiplied 2 by 50. So you just multiplied your chances significantly. So that's where it becomes like necessary, and it seems, and I will probably follow up on this in a future episode. More content, yay! But it seems that it depends on who is implementing the RAM and who is implementing the memory controller and who is implementing the CPU to really choose to use any of these features. The only one that's kind of necessary due to the high bandwidth is like the communication. From the actual like chip robustness, that's completely separate. That said, we usually think about like bit rot on hard drives and stuff like that. Hard drives have ECC like on the actual disk. Like that's just something that they're built to have. So bit rot is actually not something that's like super common to begin with. And that was like one thing that I was super nervous about, putting a whole bunch of disks in a RAID and using that as like my lifeline as a backup for everything. But yeah, bit rot is not super common in general. So that's just something to keep in mind, that it could happen, but there are error correcting codes everywhere. Even for like the most mundane things like CDs, you can poke a searing hot piece of metal through a CD and make a nice clean hole that you can see through, and the CD will be fine. Like it's made to withstand that kind of damage. So yeah,
there's already a hole in the center though.
No, that one is intentional. I'm talking about like extra holes.
Oh, I see.
Like, you know, a hole to like perhaps hang the CD by like a fishing line as like a bird distractor. Like that CD will probably still play, which is kind of insane. But yeah, I'm sure that the RAM itself, due to like the density of the actual bits on the chip, probably does have error correction. But it's probably like for 1 bit, like I mentioned for the link. It's not like a more robust
traditional
solution.
ECC.
Yeah,
it's not like a traditional ECC like DDR, like you could get in like DDR3 and DDR4 or whatever. Mm-hmm. For like,
and that's implemented by like literally having more chips to compensate for errors. So you have parity bits and stuff like that. So that is completely separate from what this is trying to achieve, which is just like the bare minimum of being able to communicate robustly. What that one is trying to achieve is, hey, if there is minor solar activity, your chips are not going to suddenly start seeing errors that are going to be significant. Because again, if you have 2 gigabytes of RAM, probably not a big deal. If you have 200 gigabytes of RAM, yeah, big deal. If you have 2 terabytes of RAM, definitely a big deal. Especially if you're using all that RAM. If you're not using it, then you're never going to notice. But if you are using it, then that's a bigger problem. That said, there are other like layers on top of this cake, and that is when you start encrypting RAM, then you need error correcting codes, because encryption is not at all like forgiving for a 1-bit error. It will go ahead and cause the whole block to be like damaged, useless. Yeah. So whenever you have encryption mixed into things, you often also have an additional layer of error correction, because you need to be able to decrypt it robustly, and you can no longer survive a single bit of difference. Like sometimes a bit is significant, sometimes it's not significant. Like that's a completely separate thing. Like think of a floating point number. If you have 0.001 versus 0.000001, that might not have a significant like trade-off for what you're trying to do. But for a single bit that's being flipped for something that's encrypted, all hell's gone loose at that point, because you can't decrypt that block and then subsequent blocks, and then it's gone from there. So I can definitely imagine that operating systems that implement encrypted RAM to protect like various different parts of like the OS and then other applications that are running and stuff like that, like they probably also have an additional layer of error correction on top of everything that adds a bit of latency, but we have super fast computers nowadays, so it's a valid trade-off, right?
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I mean, sounds like from what you said, it is a big rabbit hole, and there's a lot to that, and getting into actual computer architecture and trying to figure out how to
it's less computer architecture and more electrical engineering at this point. So that's like crazy. Way out of my wheelhouse. But I'll probably be back next week to tell you how I was completely wrong telling you about all this encryption nonsense. Turns out nothing is encrypted. It's like checks where the account number is like right there and you can print your own. And there's like no actual watermarks that anyone checks because take pictures of it with your phone. Like, anyways. Long story short, our whole like planet is doomed to evil people doing evil things anyways. So at the end of the day, does it really all even matter?
I know. As an aside, I got an email. I showed this to Dimitri and like Fernando and stuff, but I got an email for like a city building account that I had to make for my basement, and it said, here's your password. Click this link to change change your password. And it was in an email. I was like, oh, okay, whatever. It's a temporary password. I'll change it. I changed the password, and then it sends me another email that says, here's your email address. Here's your new password. I was like, no, dude. So
my bank account password is leaked. That's the
no.
Right?
I mean, it's just like a Safari
to reuse the same password, and then they really like make you realize what you've done with your life.
I mean, it was just like a Safari randomly generated password, but I was like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. Like, yeah. Anyway, I think it's just like a local company, but I was seriously considering like calling them and be like, please don't do this. This is terrible. So yeah, nothing is safe.
Nothing is safe at all. That said, they were probably balancing, like, does it matter if our customer accounts get hacked? Probably not. Is it worth the customer support headache that we don't need to deal with now since we just email everyone their passwords anyways? Probably everything's fine.
Yeah, my first thought was like, this is probably for just like old people that don't know how to use emails and stuff. They're just like, here's your password, don't contact us type of thing. So, I don't know. Still a bummer.
Yeah. Talking about things that are not bummers, we were also talking last week about async await making its way like deeper down into the NIO like infrastructure for non-blocking I/O and Swift applications. And there is, as we hoped there would be, a proposal on the Swift Evolution blog. Is it really a blog at this point? But the Swift Evolution system, there is a proposal for something called discarding task groups. And this is essentially there to make it possible to use async await with sockets and things like that.
Yeah, so like if you have something that's sort of going to be infinitely just grabbing data, like their example is if you have a task group, the task group just kind of holds on to all of the results over and over and over again until it finishes. But if you have a task group that doesn't finish, then you're going to run out of memory eventually, assuming that you've run it long enough and the data that you have is big enough. So this is a cool thing where it will discard the results of the kind of iteration of the task every time that it runs. So just sort of like I guess my first comparison, and I'm not sure if this is a great comparison, is kind of like using an auto release pool in a loop, more or less. I don't know if that's quite.
Yeah, the child basically stays alive as long as it needs to. But once the child task is done, it gets cleaned up, and that's that.
Yeah. So super cool. I don't know if I would ever have I mean, I guess if I'm using sockets, that's a use case, but probably just fills a gap that needs to be filled that there wasn't a great solution for it. And it goes through kind of some of the, let's see, where did it go? Yeah, like the alternatives, like it talked about making some sort of a task pool and this this proposal is really well written out, and it's got a lot of kind of reasoning and alternatives that they kind of considered and how they ended up on this throwing task group. So it's really cool.
Yeah. And it's been put together by the server-side Swift team at Apple. So that's like the intended like piece that they were missing to fully make SwiftNIO like operate with the async await system. As we said last time, it's currently has the event loop group. I'm like mistaking the name. I think that's what it's called. No, so there's like a group of event loops. There's like an object that owns all of them.
Yeah, I don't know.
And it will basically create a thread per core on your system, and then all event loops will live on one of those cores, basically. So it kind of manages all of that for you, so that way you can just process events and futures and promises on one of those event loops. This was all made before Swift Concurrency, and Swift Concurrency, guess what, does the same thing except with a different thread group. So that is non-ideal generally, because all your socket stuff will start on the NIO thread group, and then as soon as it passes to your high-level application, it'll need to do a context switch to a different thread on the async await thread group. That said, the async await thread group is achieving many of the same goals as the SwiftNIO one. Tries to keep everything on the same thread, tries to go ahead and minimize the amount of hops that you need by just making everything thread safe, and therefore nothing is holding state. And that makes things more complicated, but that's what Swift async await is doing. But it's doing it at the compiler level. So now with Swift async await, all those guarantees are kind of taken care of for you, the developer. So you just need to like be willy-nilly, hey, I want to await this thing. And that is essentially what SwiftNIO promises and futures were doing when you dispatch, or when you flat map out to the future that's going to happen for that result that you're waiting for. So currently we have this kind of hodgepodge in between. It's way better from a developer productivity point of view to just use Swift async await, even though performance took a hit because of that switch. And this is kind of fixing the problem by saying, okay, well, now we're going to move SwiftNIO over to async await, and things are going to be fast again. And potentially even faster than before, because it'll limit the amount of mistakes that people could have made previously, right?
Yeah, that's super exciting. I'm stoked to try it out. I mean, I don't really have a good way of like testing my Vapor code currently with, when this gets merged in and everything to like when it's changed over. But overall, I'm sure that some people like Tim or whoever have a way to kind of benchmark all of that, and it'll be interesting to see if they kind of publish like the results of X amount faster, not to mention safer. So that'll be cool. That's exciting.
Yep.
It says it's an active review until the 29th of December. So probably just people have been on vacation and haven't quite updated this, but I'm sure it's going to go through and get merged in. So that's exciting.
Yeah, it's already implemented, to say the least. So it's just a matter of process and making sure they didn't miss anything for other use cases that might be wanting something very similar but ever so slightly different than this, so we don't have to have a third variant of these task groups. And yeah, it did go through a few iterations. Like, it was originally called task pools, and that's what I remembered when I brought it up, that they are working on something. It's just not in yet. So this did get some changes from the community as a result of them going through the proper channels. So I want to like definitely congratulate the Swift server side group for making some good improvements to Swift the language for server side development, while also like being very open to the community, like being a part of that process, right? I was looking because I wanted to start making another app that uses SwiftNIO on the side during my break, and I didn't really get anywhere there. But I was like going through, and I noticed like, hey, there's one or two methods that I wrote and contributed to SwiftNIO that are just there.
Nice.
And that was really cool to see there. So they are 100% open to people helping out and contributing and getting what you need, right? They're building tools for everyone to use. And if you have a specific need in mind, then you can go ahead and get that in and have that work. So I want to encourage everyone to participate in the server-side Swift ecosystem while it's still young, because you will have a tremendous amount of say, especially if you have a very valid use case that just no one had a chance to work on yet, literally. So that you can get that part in and benefit tremendously from it.
Yep. It's almost like open source works or something.
I know. It's Apple should take note. Maybe open source Swift UI a little bit, and cool. Maybe Swift will be used on more platforms as a result of that. But maybe Apple doesn't want that. It's a very interesting dichotomy, right? Because Apple, the company, probably does not want other people using Swift, but Apple, the employees that work there, absolutely do. And
yeah, of course.
I think it's great for Apple, the company, if more and more people use Swift, because then Apple, the company, can benefit from all of the developer goodwill that they actively burn down by getting more and more people interested in the language that can only be used on Apple platforms, right? And they can only do that if it's useful elsewhere. And it'll be one of the few like open source languages that actually does have a steward that knows what they want to do with the language, like moving it forward, rather than just like a hodgepodge of open source development, which tends not to work that great. So this is like one of those few cases where you have like a big sponsor of something that is open source, that is unfortunately the driving force. Like you can't really, if they don't want to do something, it's not really going to happen. But fortunately, that means that it's going to be more consistent and more properly thought out. And because there's money paying people to do this as their full-time job, and that's at the end of the day what enables it to be high quality. Talking about things that Apple is probably not happy about, Samsung has new Mac appropriate displays out. The first one is a 5K monitor that is not made by LG. Do we know if the panel is made by LG? I think Samsung makes their own panels though, right?
They do. Yeah, it's basically Samsung and LG, I think, that make most.
Yeah, so this is the Viewfinity S9. It is a desktop monitor, 27 inches and 5K. And that means that it is appropriate for use for Macs because you get all of the pixel density that you're used to looking at, meaning you can basically run your Mac at Retina and not have a ginormous UI greeting you. It also has a 4K camera that is, I'm just going to call it, probably better than the one that ships on the Apple Studio display. And that's because it does not need to do any cropping and probably just like works better. It also like pops up from the bottom of the display, which is neat, I guess. I don't know. Apple, you could probably do better. Why did they mess this up? I don't know. I'll get into the cameras afterwards, but it also supports rotation. I don't know if that means that it will automatically like sense that you've rotated it and tell the operating system that you've rotated it. That feels like a very like deep integration that Samsung probably does not have with Apple at the moment, but could be implemented because the Pro Display XDR does it. So maybe that works. And yeah, it seems like all around to be a pretty good monitor.
Yeah, so we're looking at a Verge article, and it mentions this smart monitor M8, which not ironically, it just so happens that at my job's office there is one, and it just happens to be on my desk. It was just put there, and that's the one I use when I'm at the office. It looks almost the exact same. It probably is like the same chassis. I don't know if I think the Viewfinity S9 is like aluminum or something, and I think the other one's plastic. I don't know. Anyway, I think it's probably the same form factor, except the M8 is a 4K display, but it has that camera, and so it's really cool. It is like the camera is just this little kind of cylinder that peeks up from the top, but it's this little I don't really know how to describe it. It's like this little small plate about the size of your palm, and it has some pogo pins on the bottom, and it just magnets onto the back, and it connects with some pogo pins on the back of the display. So if you don't want it there, you can actually just take it off. It's just magnetically held on there and put it on the desk and whatever, if you don't want a camera staring at you. And I'd assume that's probably what's going to be on this new Viewfinity S9. I don't think the M8's camera is 4K, but it looks to be the exact same sort of form factor and stuff. So it's a cool monitor. And another thing that I don't think really anyone would care about, but it's kind of, I guess, worth mentioning, is it has their Samsung's like Tizen OS. So it's basically a smart TV too. It's like kind of both a monitor and a TV.
And which is probably good for the people who need like a smaller than a 55-inch TV, which don't exist anymore. So here you go. Here's 27 inches.
Yeah,
not quite as small as the
like
olden days, a 12-inch screen, but getting
20
there.
inches, you're like a baller.
Yeah.
But yeah, it looks to be a cool kind of alternative, I suppose, to the studio display, which is probably kind of what it's going up against. Let's see.
I think one thing that we didn't even mention of yet is it will have a mix of I/O, so HDMI, Thunderbolt 4, USB-C, DisplayPort. If it has Thunderbolt 4 pass-through, meaning it has Thunderbolt 4 and then a bus of Thunderbolt 4 behind it, that means you can plug two of these into the same computer via one cable. I think that will be very, very cool to have. You can currently do this with the newer Thunderbolt 4 hubs on like any of your Macs. You can plug two of the 5K displays into that, and then your computer can run both of them from one cable. Totally possible. So I think if you can do this, just daisy chaining the monitors, I think that'll be even better for most people.
Nice. I think the last kind of thing worth mentioning is it has built-in color calibration, and it seems like Samsung has like an app similar to how you put your phone up to your Apple TV and it will like calibrate the screen for you if it's not like a Dolby Vision TV. It seems like you can also do that with this display as well. So that's cool. I guess if you're, not that I really care about color calibration too much, but like if you're doing content creation or something, you could probably get a fairly color accurate screen. I don't know what like the what coverage of all of the color gamuts it has. Oh, it says 99% of the DCI-P3. Okay, so pretty good.
Yeah. So, you always have to be careful with those coverage numbers, because they are always the 2D coverage. So if you're looking at the color a color gamut is a 3D like object,
right?
And if you look at it down from the top, you get that like bell curve that we're kind of used to seeing, and then the triangle basically, and then you kind of name the coverage by how close the points are to the specs triangle. Like it could overshoot and then you have 100% coverage. It can undershoot and then you have 99% coverage. Where this gets finicky is when you stop looking at it from the top and you look at it from the side and from all sides, and it's no longer just a pretty triangle or a pyramid shape. It's this wonky shape as you go from fully illuminated to black, and you lose out on certain things like saturation and stuff like that as you go down to the blacks, and therefore you no longer get that perfect coverage that they like to claim, especially as things go down the gradient. So that's one thing to consider if you are interested in like the color calibration side of things. It is like super way complicated and almost nothing gets good coverage anyways, so like why actually worry about it? But do be careful when they like mention, this is 80% of Rec 2020. You know, Rec 2020 is a brand new one that's like way out into the extremes. You're not meant to hit it. It's just we stopped wanting to make new triangles, basically.
Yeah.
And mostly in the film industry. They're like, okay, this is getting ridiculous. We have to like come up with new specs all the time. Let's just make a big one that we're never gonna hit, but at the very least we can color correct to. And that'll be the ideal, right? If you're outside of a triangle, you pick the closest color there. And that's kind of where the industry has gone. So like always, like you can try to attain it and try to reach it, but you're not getting so much more than you think you are once you like pass something like DCI-P3, which for those that don't know is what like film projectors were showing before we had them in our regular consumer monitors, and it is better than Rec 709, which is what HDTVs were spec'd against, which was better than SD605 and so on and so forth. So yeah, that's where all this color calibration nonsense comes up. You care about it when you have two monitors side by side and they have a different white point, then you're immediately going to notice. But until then, if you just have one, you are likely not going to care too much until you need to get something printed or whatnot, and then everything looks way out of whack, but then you're already deep in the rabbit hole of color correctness anyways. That said, back to cameras. Apple, why did you decide to put such a mediocre camera in your display and then try to backpedal saying like, oh yeah, it's not performing as much as well as we thought, but then like didn't actually improve it much? Like, here's what I would do as a new product development at Apple. You have an iPad. It has a nice big screen. Put good cameras on it. Like, you have excellent cameras on your phone. Put the good cameras on an iPad. Let people use that big screen as a Mondo viewfinder, and like take advantage of the more expensive device to have excellent cameras on there, right? Then you can do really cool stuff. And hey, now that you have these excellent cameras, you can go ahead and put them on your monitors that you also sell two of. Or actually, I guess just one with cameras. And that would be totally fine. Yes, I get that you can make a silly little thing that attaches to the top and you put your phone there and it just like instantly becomes a camera. But like,
no one wants to do that, dude. I don't.
You want to use your phone while you're using your computer. Like that's the secret of Zoom meetings. You have your phone below the camera and you can go ahead and seem very interested in what people are talking about while you go ahead and use your phone. But you can't do that if your phone is your camera, because then you're just going to be looking at it, hoping that you can use it while it's recording you. But you can't, because it is out of reach, and you can't use it because it's connected to the thing. So, come on.
What were you saying? I wasn't paying attention. I'm kidding. I was on my phone.
This week's episode of Code Completion is brought to you by Not Pho. Tired of eating the same old meals time and time again? Consider Vietnamese food. You might already know pho, but there are tons of other flavors specific to Vietnamese cuisine that are sadly not well known around the world. This includes everything from sandwiches like banh mi, rice plates like com tam, and even the deliciously savory crepes known as banh xeo. That's where the app Not Pho comes in. It's a free-to-try app dedicated to teaching you more about the wonders behind Vietnamese cuisine, brought to life with colorful and interactive illustrations and animations. Learn how to make many of the classic Vietnamese flavors at home, but even if you don't cook, you'll know how to order like a pro next time you visit your local Vietnamese restaurant. Recently new is version 1.2, which brought a brand new home screen to the app featuring a recipe of the week and a map of Vietnam, allowing you to start exploring recipes by region as well. Thanks again to Not Pho for sponsoring our show. Search for Not Pho, that's N-O-T space P-H-O, on the App Store today to give it a try completely for free. So, there is one more monitor that Samsung did come out with, and that is the Odyssey Neo G9. And this is significant because it's the only ultra-wide monitor that actually can like support Retina resolutions.
Yeah, so I have the first version of this monitor, which is just the Odyssey G9, not the Neo G9. They came out with another generation of the 49-inch G9, which is the Neo G9, and now they have a bigger 55-inch is it 59? 57, sorry. So mine's 49, and Dimitri would never use this in a million years because it's like 5120 by 1440. So it's essentially two 1440p displays. Yeah, he can see pixels. He's got some eagle eyes. So the thing with this is it's basically two 4K TVs side by side. It's 7680 by 4320. So yeah, that's... Oh, sorry, 7680 by 2160. My bad. So it's two 2160p displays side by side. So I mentioned that I got this monitor like on a deal. It was like $600 off. I think I paid $1,000 for it. And I had been searching, like I had been on a multi-year quest to find out the perfect amount of screen space for me. I had at one time 2 ultra-wide displays. Then I had 2 ultra-wide displays and a 4K display next to me, and it was too much. Anyway. It got to the point where I was like, I'll try this. They call it super ultra-wide, which is basically just 2 displays, fused together with no bezels in between or anything. And I love it. I've been using it for, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years or something like that. So I was watching the AMD... next generation of GPU announcement thing, and they announced this, and I was like, holy crap, this is sweet. So I actually just Googled this like a couple days ago, and there wasn't anything on it. So when Dimitri sent this out, I was super stoked. But long story short, it's mini LED, which is super exciting. It's a bigger screen, higher resolution. I don't really care what the price is. I will probably buy it because I've kind of tested this form factor of super ultra wide, and I think that it's perfect for me. So this will probably be my next monitor, even if it is like $3,000 and I have to save up some money for it. So I'm super excited personally. I mean, it looks like super like gamery on the back, and I don't really care about that. I just care about the form factor. It does have, it's got like a high refresh rate, and this one that I have is technically 240 hertz. I don't use that. I use it. Excuse me. It does actually work with my MacBook Pro's variable refresh rate. So it does go up to 120 with variable refresh rate, which is pretty cool. But yeah, it's the perfect monitor in my opinion. And so having it go up to be a little bit bigger and be sort of not really 8K, it's sort of like 4K, super wide 4K.
It's a double
super
4K, right?
For me. It's double 4K, yeah.
Yeah.
Like mine is double 1440p, this is double 4K. So a fair jump in resolution for sure. Mm-hmm. And it's mini LED, which mine isn't.
Yeah. And you might be wondering, like, if this will even work on Macs, because, like, who knows if 8K displays work on Macs. But I am pleased to say this has less pixels than the 6K. What do they even call? What does Apple call their 6K display again? It's like the Pro Display X0. There we go.
Yeah, that one.
That one. That they still sell at original price, which is a little mind-boggling at this point. But apparently they're not refreshing it, or so the rumors claimed last time. So either way, this has less pixels than that. So they are kind of lying when they say 8K, like Spencer mentioned.
Oh, yeah.
It's just 2 4K displays right next to each other. So it's more than 5K, but less than 6K at the end of the day. But in a different arrangement, and having things ultra wide is actually super useful when you have lots of columns of code, for instance, side by side.
Yeah.
That works really, really nicely, especially when you have to have a simulator on screen and this and that. And you don't have to have a bezel in smack in the middle of your screen.
Yep.
So if you get 2 of these, then you get a proper 8K display.
Yeah, there you go.
So that's something
just buy an 8K TV at
consider.
that point.
But it won't be curved.
True. Oh yeah, it is curved. That is true.
Yeah. So,
But then you'd have a bezel in the middle of that, and then that's like, oh no.
no good.
I'm trying to avoid bezels. That's the whole reason I like this.
Yeah, that's one of the nice things about those curved monitors, especially when you do have something that's so wide. You actually do start to see color shift depending on like if it's flat and where you're looking. So it's nice for it to be curved and for it to be like visible from every angle. As long as you were centered, right? As soon as you start doing this, then everything kind of gets a little wonky, I imagine. Color
No, for me, I don't know. It's like an IPS panel as far as I know. I think mine is. But the viewing angles are great. Like if I go like this, it doesn't really seem like there's much of a shift. I mean, maybe if I go like way out on an angle, but it's pretty good. And I can imagine that with the mini LED versions, it would only be better.
Yeah.
So I guess last thing to mention is it will have DisplayPort 2.1. So it's pretty set up to be like run at that whole resolution at those high frame rates, which is I'd assume what you need for. I mean, I guess the whole problem is it's only two 4K displays, but you're running it off of one cable. It's not like you're plugging two cables into your Mac and into this. It's all running through one. So I wonder if they need like display stream compression to.
Oh, most definitely, especially to hit the 240 hertz.
Oh yeah.
But it's as we mentioned, if it's at 120 hertz, this is just half of a 8K TV at 120 hertz. So that's definitely within the headroom. If you think about two frames just being two of these. So yeah, exciting times, especially for Mac users, because it seems like the people that actually use these ultra-wide displays tend to be the gamers, and the gamers tend not to care about high resolution because that turns their game into mush. Because most gamer GPUs are not made for that. They're made for something a little less high end. So it's good that these kinds of monitors are starting to come out, which means that GPUs are finally starting to catch up, and that means that the chip shortage is finally starting to end. Maybe.
Yes.
So yeah. That might mean we can get a real Mac Pro next year when Apple decides to uncancel their plans that they've canceled, apparently, via rumor. I'm not too sure. So, Spencer, I've got a code completion tip for you. This time, it's anytime you run into an error, you get an error printed out into the log, for instance, right? And many people are very tempted to just copy that into Google and hope to find some results. And most of the time, if you just do that, you've already made a fatal flaw because most error codes, at least for iOS development, start with a hyphen or a minus right in front of them. And that is Google speak for do not include anything with this error code. So that is like one of the flaws that you will may or may not learn to work around that might just dissuade you from ever Googling errors ever again, at which point, I'm sorry, the solution is to get rid of the minus and then do that search again, and you will be much more successful. The second solution is to go to osstatus.com, and this is a website that has put together almost every error code that like you might run into on Apple platforms, and it will categorize them by framework, code, and then error message, so that way you can see what the error means at the very least, like get a hint as far as what you're trying to search for. So that's like the easiest way to kind of get started on the trip to find out what those error codes mean. The second thing that you can try to do is check your local headers for the frameworks you're using. For instance, if you're using AV Foundation, check the AV Foundation framework for an errors.h file, and that will likely spell out a whole bunch of errors. You might also need to check Core Media, Core Video, Core Audio for all the related errors, because it's all like one giant framework, and they're all unfortunately spelled out in different places. So hopefully that can help you if you've ever tried to copy paste errors and then just like given up on society as a result of that action, because you found nothing related because the minus kind of sabotaged you from the beginning.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know why Apple puts the minus, because ironically enough, when you quick look NS error, the minus is not taken into account, and therefore you get like a very large integer, because the minus bit is like a most significant one in like 32-bit or 64-bit, and it just you don't even end up with the code at that point when you PO an NS error. So it's overall not great that we have negative error codes. But yeah, I guess if you're designing something for your own users, maybe don't use negative error codes, so then they can be successful when they search for stuff.
Yeah. What a concept.
Yeah.
Yeah. The OS status is cool, and I've used it before. I just typed in a random code, which was 80, and it pulled up 4 different things. So, like, as an example, error code 80 could be an error in Foundation, and it's something related to NSXML parser, or it could be something related to HomeKit. And so you probably know which one that is, but you can, like, I'll usually take that actual error name, like HM error code missing entitlement, and then Google that, and usually get better results if I need to actually go further with trying to figure out what the problem is. So yeah, OS status is awesome.
And the irony is that OS status is the original like error codes in macOS. And they are something that you can actually look up on the system itself. So OS status comes with utilities that you can pass an OS status integer to, and they will give you information about the error that you've run into. But this feels like lost knowledge in a way, because it's not like anyone knows what the C APIs that interact with OS status are anymore. They're just getting these as a result of these much higher level frameworks. And therefore it's kind of like daunting to even know that you can do that. So I think osstatus.com is a great intermediary in that sense that bridges that gap. And it's easy to remember because you'll oftentimes get an OS status error code in the log that you can then find this way. So Spencer, I hear you've got a new TV that you may want to review today.
Yes.
Is it that one that's behind you?
It is, yes. Ironically, you said 55-inch TVs are dead. This is a 55-inch TV.
I said smaller than 55-inch. But yeah, 55-inch is getting harder and harder to find.
Yes, it is. Yes, so I, well, kind of a long story. I wanted a better TV, and I've kind of really just bought, like, not quite basic level TVs, but, like, you know, like the last TV I bought was a Hisense TV that is pretty good. I think it was $600 or something. It was like, it's pretty good, and it's actually just in my bedroom now. I just kind of moved my TVs around, but that was the one that was here before. But this is a Samsung, I think it's S95B, which is, it's QD OLED. So I kind of jumped on the OLED bandwagon as I was researching this TV specifically and things about, you know, like OLED burn-in and everything for probably 2 weeks before I eventually bought this TV. So it was on sale at Best Buy, so I got it for, I think it was $1,400. And you know, originally when it came out earlier this year, it was like almost $3,000 or something. So I thought the price was pretty right, and it's kind of like the first generation of QD OLED, which is supposed to last a little bit longer and be brighter, the way that it uses the quantum dots and everything. And yeah, it's a really good TV. The jump in quality is very, very noticeable. Like, it's super vibrant, and so vibrant that I had to turn on saturation to try to like actually make it seem accurate and everything. But it's, you know, it's 4K. It can do 120 hertz on all 4 HDMI ports, which is cool for when I want to game on it and stuff. So it's been kind of eye-opening to see the difference in like a 4K TV from the one that I replaced, which was from like 2017, not the Hisense one. I moved TVs around anyway. Big difference in that, and it's cool to. I don't know. I felt like I was kind of using the F word, the future proofing word, to try to not have to buy another TV for a while. And what I did to kind of sate my fear of burn-in is I bought it from Best Buy, and it seems like they're about the only place that will actually cover burn-in if you have a warranty. So I bought a 5-year warranty with it. So I'm like, this will last me forever, and if it ever gets burn-in, I should be covered. So that was kind of the thing that put my worries to rest. But overall, it's good. I mean, it's a smart TV. I don't use any of the Samsung smart TV stuff. I just stuck my Apple TV on it. And I have, my computer and stuff on it too. So I don't really care about any of those features, but it's quite bright for an OLED. And yeah, I don't know what else to say. It's a good TV. I'm happy with it. I will be keeping it, I guess, is kind of the ultimate thing, which was not quite certain when I bought it. It was like, that's a lot of money, and I don't know if I'm gonna like the OLED, if it's gonna have like backlight strobing and everything. Nope, it works pretty great. There is a little bit of dimming that happens, but it's not super noticeable to me. I guess if you were sensitive to that, it might be, but I'm really happy with it, so I will be keeping it and hopefully using it for like the next 5 years, and then replacing it with a new one, and then using it for a bunch more time until 8K TVs are like the norm. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I'm still afraid of OLED TVs because of burn-in. I did open up, like, turn on an old iPhone the other day, and I did see the little home indicator burned in. So it does still happen. It's not like completely out of the woods yet. That said, the TV that you have has a semi-new technology in that don't have red LEDs or red OLEDs, blue OLEDs, and green OLEDs. You have a single white OLED that is turned in, or it might be like a bluish white.
I think it's blue,
it's turned into a blue light, a red light, and a green light via the quantum dots filters that are on top of it. Which means that the chance of burn-in, which was different for different colors, is no longer the case. Now you have a uniform panel that essentially emits a single color, and then a bunch of filters on top of it to change those colors before you perceive them, which gives you a lot of the benefits of non-OLEDs on top of an OLED that could possibly burn in, but in this case it would burn in a lot more uniformly, meaning that the whole screen would dim in one direction or another rather than individual portions based on like heavy use or heads-up displays and games and stuff like that.
I mean, we've got OLED on our phones and stuff, and so you notice the contrast ratio there, but just comparing it side by side with my other TV that I have, the black levels, I mean, it's just like mind-blowing. There's like those OLED tests on YouTube and stuff that you can watch, and I was like,
with the cherries and stuff like that.
Holy crap. Yeah. It's mind-blowing when it's in a screen that size, and you can really, I mean, you know what the backlight in a TV looks like, and so not having a backlight there, it's pretty impressive. Yeah, I mean, it is the wow, I forget the burn-in that's scary, right? But I'm hoping that I've kind of prevented that, one, with going with the QD OLED, and two, and if it does happen, like, the warranty was like $400, but I was like, for a TV like this, peace of mind is nice. And I'm, turning the TV off as soon as I, as soon as I'm done and everything. I'm, trying to be quite safe with it. But there's always the chance. But I hope that Best Buy will honor that warranty and actually let me replace it. I think the thing is, like, if they're like 3 pixels with burn-in, then you can replace it or whatever. So we'll see. We may have an update in like episode 300 of Code Completion where they don't honor the warranty and I get salty or something. But for now, it's a great TV.
Yeah, on the topic of warranties, I don't know if they sold you one via Square Trade, like it's sold at Best Buy, but the warranty is via
Maybe.
Square Trade. Um, Regardless, be careful with those warranties. They will most definitely honor it, but you have to fight for what you want. So in my case, I had an aging Vizio P series, which is one of the high end Vizio TVs that cost several $1,000s. And they tried to replace it with like the bottom tier Hisense. And I was like, yeah, I'm not okay with that. So you will have to go back and forth and prove your point that if you spent a lot of money for specific features, you need to make sure that the model that they're trying to replace it with, which they're just going on a spreadsheet of like how to make the most money out of the warranty replacement. You can and you should argue for the specific features that you wanted in your original TV that the replacement that they're offering does not have. So do keep that in mind for the eventual time that you need to use your warranty. And also keep in mind that whatever you're getting as a replacement to that warranty is not going to have a warranty. So any issues that it has after like 90 days, you're stuck with.
Sure.
So in our case, we ended up with a comparable P series from like a later year, but after about 3 months, one of the falled LEDs, so one of the backlights, started to dim ever so slightly, and it's stayed at that brightness since. But in like snow scenes, you can definitely see like there's one little muddy color right in the middle of the TV. So we can't do anything about that because we got the TV essentially for free due to warranty. But do keep that in mind when you do use those warranties. I do have one question for you. Is the UI of the TV in 4K or is it at 1080 still?
No, yeah, it's in 4K. Everything looks really sharp. Like that was again, I read a ton of reviews and I was doing a bunch of research. Not that I cared about it, but one of the things is like, if you do use the UI, it's great. It looks good and it is responsive. The remote is also super cool. It charges via USB-C, and it also has a solar panel on it, so you can just stick this in the sunlight, and it will charge forever. I was like, that's really cool. I don't have to replace batteries. So yeah,
just put a sun in your couch, and then if you lose it in the couch, you're good too.
There we go. Yeah, I'll put the sun on my couch. Duly noted.
Looking forward to hearing how it holds up after several years, and I guess we'll be able to really sing its praises after 4 years of no burn-in. And you're like, this TV still has no burn-in, and no one will be able to purchase it anymore because it's long been replaced by future models at that point. But as always, I want to personally thank everyone for listening in this week. Please be sure to follow us on Twitter or mastodon.social at Code Completion to know when new episodes go live, and feel free to tweet at us if there's ever a topic you'd like for us to dig into. Most importantly, as a small podcast, please be sure to share this with your friends and family who are also interested in any part of the process of app development. It's your support that enables us to continue doing this, and we hope to grow a healthy community around everything we discuss. Once again, I want to give my thanks to Spencer, who is at Spencer C. Curtis. That's SpencerCurtis. And for joining me this week. My name, once again, is Dimitri, and you can find me at Dimitri Buñuel. That's DimitryBouniol. And we'll see you all next week.
Bye.
Bye.